Okay, welcome everybody. Don, roll call.
Representative Kinner.
Here.
Representative Larson. Here. Representative Schwartz. Representative Simpson. Representative Stith.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Senator Guru. Here. Senator Hicks. Here. Senator Kinski. Here. Senator Steinmetz. Co-Chairman Perkins. Here. Chairman Nicholas.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So just so our colleagues know, so Evan had some health issues that kind of cropped up yesterday. Spent the night in the hospital. He's still there. He's doing better. So we just wish him our best and a quick recovery. All right. Don, I think first, and why don't you walk through the day with us first?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a handful of housekeeping items as well as some running balances for your consideration as an introduction. And then the agenda provides for moving into the capital construction markup. We have two bills scheduled at the end of the day, EGI, as well as that's employee group health insurance modifications, as well as modifications regarding the workers' compensation program. Tomorrow would include the appearance by CLA, which is Clifton Larson Allen, the executive branch as consultant regarding ARPA funds, followed by the fee bill on fire prevention and electrical safety, markup of ARPA and conserve general funds, and then followed by a round robin. It is possible if you get through capital construction today, we could, if the chair so desire, we could address technical issues for ARPA, not real substantive issues, or excuse me, not ARPA, round robin, but items that you said, hey, would you look into this and come back to us? Most of them are rather modest, but you may not have a full agenda between, say, 1 and 3 if you move expeditiously through capital construction. We could insert that there if you desire.
So, Don, with regards to the round robin, I'm just trying to think. Your prior discussion was the sooner we get the round robin done, the better. For you to have a bill that comes out on time. And so what happens if we do round robin on Monday or Tuesday next week via Zoom?
Mr. Chairman, we have enough to do, over the weekend and Friday to address that. That's probably about the latest. Otherwise, we're doing work, and in all likelihood, we'll have to redo the same work that we initiated.
Okay, then on the ARPA, what do you envision how long that will take to put together, so we can actually look at the product?
Mr. Chairman, I think it'll take about 2.5 weeks.
And changes to that, if we will that be a simpler thing if we have a round robin on ARPA?
Mr. Chairman, it would be simpler than the budget bill, absolutely. And I think there is some need to get that moving in the process, introduced on day one. Keep in mind, the ARP bill is not a mirror bill. So it would be returned to either the Senate or the House committee, and you would have your own one-sided round robin at that time to insert or remove things.
Well, and we could expedite it so that it actually comes to the floor probably on the first day.
It's possible if it is introduced first, if you meet at noon and put back on the floor.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of exploring alternatives for timing and what we're doing. And I'm just afraid that we're rushed enough. I mean, if we have a couple of days to digest it, Mr. Co-Chair, we'll come up with a better product theoretically. So.
Another thing we could do is actually, we could have we could kind of have a round robin, even after the bill was numbered. And so whichever side it went to first, we could kind of,
Adopt those.
we might be able to have those things if we round robin and got some kind of agreement on reconsiderations or better thoughts. There's some other options there. That's been one of my main worries, starting to actually lose a little sleep over it about this 20-day session and what we've got to do in this 20-day session. At the same time, it doesn't work if staff doesn't have time to get to do their job and do the great job that they always do. You know, we gotta find the Goldilocks solution.
Well, on the
Mr.
budget,
Chairman.
go ahead.
A question, you've got far more experience than I have. The few round robins that I've been through, I've seen some that are almost transformative on the budget that are really consequential in terms of the dollars. I've seen some where it's a technical fix-it or a clarification or a small wish. And I don't know what this one will do, what this session will bring, but does it make sense for the House and the Senate to give to their chairs what they think they would bring to the table, and for the two of you to sit down and see if it's consequential enough that we really need to take a Zoom meeting for it?
So I think the answer to that is probably, that's a good point. I don't think that the round robin is going to be transformative or have any major components to it that I know of at this point in time. So it may be that most of it we can fix in our respective floors almost in terms of any major corrections. But one of those things that there's always something that pops up and you go, oh shoot, we just forgot that. Or
We have highlighted a number of things that we want to be brought to in the round robin. So, but that's the honor for the budget, I think. You know, and I don't know, maybe if we finish early enough tomorrow, we could sit down in one afternoon
and work on it.
But the round robin, ARPA is I think a little different issue. And if you have any, Dawn, I mean, you've been doing this longer than any of us. When you patch all of your different experiences together, would you have any suggestions for as far as process in this regard?
Mr. Chairman, and it's only my random thoughts, which are combined with a couple of bucks would be worth a free cup of coffee.
Well, actually, if you need some, I'll go get it for you.
No.
It's silly free.
Typically, what I've seen successfully executed in the past is, and I have a sheet that I've circulated here with the total amounts, and you can see that the ARPA amounts, you're talking about $545 million.
Where's that sheet? Here we go.
So I'm talking about the third column of numbers there. The governors and judicial letters add up to 261. Primarily yesterday, you spent another 9.7 million in ARPA. These are for permissible purposes. These are like the water projects, broadband, response to the pandemic, those sorts of things. So you've got $250 million left over, although you may not concur with the $261 million of requests from the governor's office. What I've seen successful in the past is a top-down approach and asking some basic questions. How much do you want to appropriate this session, and how much do you want to set aside for future appropriations? Do you want to set aside 100 million or 200 million? Just big numbers. You don't have to hit it exactly. And then let's hypothetically say you want to set aside $200 million for future considerations. Well, that means you have 345 million left out of the 545. What other big items do you want to kind of earmark some bills that the other committees have suggested in terms of broadband or water or other ideas and say, okay, out of the 345, in the back of my mind, 145 hypothetically is going to go to broadband and water, and we support that. That leaves you 200 million, and it narrows down the options. So out of the 200 million, maybe there are some projects that you have yourselves, maybe there are some that the governor has that you concur with, and you can start to fill up that pot of 200 million. It's quite possible to do that on the next column as well, what is termed on this page, the conserved general fund. This one is a little bit up in the air still as well. You've got about $550 million. The governor, which you have not walked through all of his request, he suggests spending, I think it's about 207,650, not counting the $100 million set aside in the LSRA for energy matching funds. Again, you may agree or disagree with some of those, but you could take the same approach from a top-down purpose, but rather than save and with the intention of appropriating next session or the following session, some of that money you may want to save permanently. And at a top line, just hypothetically, let's say you want to save $100 million. I just grabbed that out of the air. Then the question is, well, what account? You know, do you want it temporary savings or permanent savings? Do you want it for schools or general operations, that sort of thing? And again, it narrows down where you want to be at the end of the day. And you can probably identify, hey, we have $50 million or $150 million or $350 million left over. And those are the projects that you can contemplate. And I would, just from my own perspective, I think it's worthwhile looking at your other committee bills because several of them may have support on the floor for introduction, and you may want to at least mentally set aside, well, we see the education committee or the water committee is requesting X million dollars for this. We better make room for something for that. And I guess I always look down as a top-down approach, and it minimizes the number of options at some point. Okay. One suggestion.
Thank you.
What are the chairman predisposed to do? Is to have a work session to start to frame that up, or?
And we talked a little bit about that yesterday, that we do think maybe we ought to have a work session, a joint work session
For the ARPA.
on ARPA.
We'll do that.
Just
this afternoon,
and
is my guess.
And we're hoping we can get started on that this afternoon. And you know, and it's, I think our lines a lot along what Don just spoke about. In fact, you know, my thought is we'll actually put a spreadsheet up on the screen, and we'll just kind of keep track of this as we start to do that, so we can just see, again, if we kind of start out with the end in mind where we want to be when we finish up, we can kind of keep all that balance, and we'll just keep that running total to help. You know, that's kind of what we had talked about. So that's what we're hoping to do this afternoon.
This afternoon. All right, that helps. And then, Mr. Chairman, there was some discussion, and I'm a little confused here, is about the Zoom meeting to do round robin and next week. And, you know, I think it was just brought up as to when we would do that. So the sooner we have that, I can block out my schedule. It would be very, very beneficial to know what days that we're looking at actually doing that. So I don't.
Well, the problem is we don't know. I mean, we've been doing so many different things. We haven't sat down and say, okay, this is how much, these are our round robin issues, and this, you know, we've got to go through the whole thing.
But can we just reserve which day next week?
Yeah, we can. And we'll work on that again this afternoon and tomorrow. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So I'm really concerned about the burden on staff. The budget's a heavy lift, but if ARPA loans 2.5 weeks, you don't like the idea of the two chairs seeing really what we have on round robin, dispensing with having to wait until Monday, Tuesday of next week to do it.
So with the ARPA, I mean, we'll kick out a draft bill tomorrow. And then at some point, we're going to have to look at it and review it. And if we think we need to do something with it, then
We have to get, we do the draft bill, we have to get back together. We have to at least meet to approve it. And if it's in really good shape, we may be able to do that by ballot, by email ballot. But if it takes additional discussion, we're gonna have to meet together as a committee, do that. In anticipation, we would do that remotely. So because it hopefully would be a short meeting.
we could get new guidance that come out 2 weeks from now. And we'd say, wait a minute, we can't do this, we gotta do this. And so we might have to react to it. I think it'll all shake out. As a practical matter, I think we'll all shake out and we can get just about everything done that we need to.
So Senator Guru, you're not smiling, or that's your unhappy smile.
I'm listening and I'm trying to understand and understanding and listening to the wisdom of my chairs. But here's my point. And I was trying to listen to what Don said too, and I'm having a hard time understanding why it wouldn't be better. Or what's the hold up in being able, we've got all day today.
We're gonna
burning by
work
the
all day
moment.
today.
And we have all day tomorrow. That what's the reason that we can't get, and we know we're gonna finish this Capcom bill, we'll get through it as much as we can. Go through the ARPA bill this afternoon and start marking it up. And then couldn't we squeeze in a round robin tomorrow after you all look at that, after you all look at all the things that we said, put a pin in this, put a pin in that, and then maybe run around and talk amongst ourselves about what we might have to add or not. And then do that on Thursday afternoon and have all those things done. And then if we have a Zoom meeting next week, it's just to go over the ARPA dollars or any leftovers, or is that what you're saying? And I just wasn't hearing it.
I think that's what we're saying. We're gonna get everything done, but I think that there's a possibility we're gonna have to convene for a meeting next week. So that's all. Just trying to give you, and we'll know before we leave here what that is, exactly what that is.
Mr. Chairman, that was all these numbers floating around in your head and stuff. Maybe it's just I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but after next week, then all of a sudden I'll be saying, oh, I got to go back and roll. Why did we do? What did we do? Right now, I still know why.
We're gonna get as far down the road as we can and still get you out of here on Thursday.
Thank you. That wasn't.
Well, yeah, I know you're leaving Friday morning, but we're gonna, our goal is to wrap this up tomorrow. Then he's happy about it.
Okay, let's get going.
Okay.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin, or you want to jump right into Capcom?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, the committee requested staff to review whether or not there was any authorization to move forward with the YDOT RIS system, and there is no bill to do that. The chairman of the Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Interim Committee did send a letter to you on December 14th, and they requested approval not only for the support of the budget requests, which you've already marked up, but they're also asking JAC to draft the authorization to move forward with the RIS system. They did not themselves. I just bring that to your attention. So there's no pending authorization out there in the budget, which would be arguably permissible or within a standalone piece of legislation.
Okay, well, and we'll just make sure that we do that one way or the other.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes means yes or no means no. That's right.
Go ahead, next.
Another just very quick update. We have added the school facilities standards and the major maintenance the lease formula to a potential interim topic, either for this committee or another committee. There are some parameters and modest oversight by the state construction department in that the lease amount shall not exceed the average cost per square foot for leased building or facilities comparable to those appropriate for public K-12 education. So there are some parameters within which the charter schools must operate, but certainly the committee could look at that on interim and determine if they need to be strengthened. Last item is just a return very briefly to the excerpt from the available funds page. And I just wanted to point out that the total actions of the committee on the general funds, you have spent $6.6 million more than the governor. Of that, just $67,715 is actually regular general funds. So remarkable consistency there with the governors to date. With respect to conserved general funds, you have spent $6.5 million more than the governor. And with respect to ARPA funds, these are direct ARPA funds for permissible uses. So like the response to the COVID, you've spent $9.8 million. One last item, and it is a needed correction here. We got it after we printed. But with your action regarding the matching dollars for the University of Wyoming, you removed $2 million from SER, from SIPA, and made that general funds in support of the School of Energy Resources. But then you added $28 million in matching funds, also out of SIPA. Right now, just something to keep in the back of your mind, you have a negative balance in SIPA of $26 million because you've overspent that account.
Go ahead.
So, Don, if you would just remind me of that 28 million, I think 25 million was to Dr. Perry's. Oh, it was for the full 28. Yeah, that's right. 3 plus the 25. So that consumes the total 28 was that one appropriation.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that is correct. Although that 28 on my handout sheet should actually be 26.
26.
And the reason being is you saved $6 million.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
And
then, Mr. Chairman, in the governor's budget proposal, he basically spent all of available SIPA within the CAPCON and other components. And so as we make some of these actions, we need to bear that in mind, that was committed unless we do something otherwise. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's correct. And that's why that 26 million negative may change within the next hour, right?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Dawn, I don't see anything on here for the LSRA, so I'm assuming there's no appropriations currently. I thought there was some money that was coming out of there that was going towards school capital construction, but there's nothing out of the LSRA at this point in time. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, there is 3 expenditures, actually 4 expenditures out of the LSRA. There is a backstop to school foundation program. There is a backstop to school capital construction. There is $20 million for the emergency public welfare emergency expenditure provided to the governor's office. And there is $1 million that is, I wouldn't describe it necessarily as appropriated, but in the governor's recommendation, he includes $100 million for matching funds related to energy activities in the infrastructure bill. And it depends on how you wish to handle that.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, that $100 million was I understood it, Don, was a deposit out of the conserved funds. And then the request is to earmark that $100 million in the LSRA for those expenditures, but it would be a net increase. Is that correct? Or am I misunderstanding the way that the governor's letter request was?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the issue is under current law, 717 million would already transfer to the LSRA. So we're profiling that 100 million as a subset of the 717.
Okay. Anything else? Go ahead.
You gave us. You've got 256 million. And so if we kind of want to keep a running tally on SIPA, we've got we have to take out the $121 million of the auto appropriation for state funded capital construction. And then we have and then on the Govs rec, did we approve in the Govs rec yesterday, the automatic transfer from the the $20 million automatic transfer to Capcom?
Mr. Chairman, you have not.
Okay. And that's in the Capcom bill then. All right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's probably in round robin in the section 300 where you want to.
Okay. And so anyway, if assuming if you do that, then I think, anyway, we'll just keep it running. Let's keep it running. You help us keep a running track on SIPA so we don't overspend stuff. All right, thanks. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Don. Let's jump into Capcom.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the capital construction budget is agency 227. First unit for your consideration is major maintenance. It appears on page 17, unit 7001. Major maintenance is based on a 2.56%. And one item that I just wanted to bring to your attention, you will see on page 16, there is a request to break out state parks as its own separate appropriation this year. It doesn't add to the total, but it just asks that that state parks be treated the equivalent of UW and community colleges.
So, and what is that number?
185.
No, I mean the state parks number.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, it's 100.
yeah, their total request is about just shy of $8 million, 5.9 million for buildings and 2 million for roads.
And that's at 2.5956%.
2.56%, correct, Mr. Chairman.
So does that take a motion on our part?
Mr. Chairman, I think that would be beneficial, just to give us direction whether to break it out or not.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to break out the state parks component independent.
Is there a second discussion? Mr. Co-Chair, our friends in the Senate, do you have a preference on this?
I think breaking it out is a good thing. And we've capital state parks, so it's just a little bit different animal.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, our motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reduce the amount from 185.7 down to 145.5. And I'm rounding here because the real crux of the motion is I'd like it to move it to the 2% versus the 2.56. So the motion is to move that number to 2% and the corresponding dollar value.
Second being had, discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
And
And
Mr.
that would be
Chairman,
for the state parks and for, correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that would include the state parks in that calculation at
Okay.
2%.
Just for clarification. Any other motions on unit 7001?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I would move that we incorporate, and I think we've done this before, would be a block grant concept for capital construction for the University of Wyoming. And what we would do is I would make an amendment that we would authorize $50 million to the University of Wyoming for capital construction projects that would include the Law College, War Memorial Stadium, and Corbett Pool.
You have a second? Moving second, discussion?
Mr. Chairman, my only discussion is, does that really need to go in major maintenance? Is there a better position within this budget to
Don?
located. I'm not sure we're in the right spot to do that. I appreciate the motion. I just don't think we're in the right unit.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like the $50 million would be for new construction, and it would arguably be best addressed at the UW section, which appears, I believe, on page 103.
So you want to bring that back up at 103?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just overly anxious.
We appreciate your enthusiasm. Okay. Anything else for major maintenance? Move to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Don, next.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a question on, so major maintenance, is that out of general fund or is that out of SIPA?
It's general fund. Okay, we're on next division.
Mr. Chairman, page 21, State Building Commission Flex Fund, Unit 7011.
So Don, with regards to this, what's the balance in that fund now?
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to Leanne. My recollection is it's about 9 million.
And of that 9 million, how much of it is obligated or encumbered, one way or both? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Leanne Hogella, so let me pull that number up really quick for you.
Mr. Chairman, while she's looking that up, could I just, is this a good time to bring an amendment?
Sure.
We've put some money in there, Mr. Chairman, to address some of these level 1, level 2 in contingency things without showing our hands per item, but I'm just concerned that with the cost of this, that we're going to shortchange the ability to get done what we need to. And so I would just kind of like to prepare while we're waiting on Leanne to put in another $5 million into the flex fund. Doesn't have to be used up, but it's there because in the event that these level 1, level 2 and other commitments that we have there are insufficient.
And what's the source of the 5 million?
It'd be general fund. I don't care if it's conserved ARPA, or it could be conserved ARPA. That would work well because it'd be one time.
And is there a second? Second, so discussion. So Don, my understanding is that in the past, we've had as much, I can remember $9 and $10 million or $5 million that we would put in the capital construction account for various possibilities that arise over the course of the biennium. For example, if 2 houses came for sale over within the Capitol complex area, or a building comes up for sale that is an opportune building to acquire so we can get out of leasing and get in there, own our own buildings, that type of thing. That we have an account where those funds are available, that so we can take advantage of that through the SBC or some other mechanism. Is this the account that we use for that?
Mr. Chairman, and unfortunately, it's confusing based on the language in the budget request. Although the title of this is flex contingency, I believe the request is to put this money in the SBC contingency, which is not the flex contingency. The reason I say that is the SBC contingency is used for level 1 and level 2 feasibility study. The $2.3 million request before you is for that collection of level 1 and level 2 feasibility studies. This account, and Leanne can correct me, this account has $9.435 million available in it. Of that, $648,000 is encumbered, but that is already taken out by the 9.4 balance. So it's a $10 million balance minus the 648.
So Don, this doesn't, isn't there a pot of money in here for unfinished projects?
Mr. Chairman, there is, and that is the flex contingency. And it's unfortunate that the language in the budget is kind of commingling here. The flex contingency account has a balance of $14 million. It has an encumbrance of $226,000. I believe this is the account that would address overruns for a large state project in the middle of the state. And those funds are not encumbered yet. So mentally, you want to reduce that $14 million by
That amount.
Correct.
14, what's the number that's,
That's a confidential number.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
so with that explanation, as I'm looking at the different things, there is only a request to put money into the flex contingency or only putting money into the SBC contingency? Or is there two requests here?
Mr. Chairman, the request itself is for money to put into the flex contingency. The flex contingency's permissible uses is to cover the costs of the rising costs of construction. So that's like inflation or material costs. I believe, I could be wrong, and the budget office and the governor's office could correct me, but I believe the request of $2.3 million is actually for level 1, level 2.
So you're saying it's not in the right fund?
That would be my conclusion based upon the narrative on page 19.
Thank you for that clarification.
So we have, there's an ARPA bill request, I believe, to cover the inflationary components of certain projects. And so this would be the place, a place to address that rather than what this is doing. Correct?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And you know, you could just direct us to put the 2.3 million into contingency fund for the level 1, level 2. That's an easy fix as well.
Mr. Co-Chair, do you have a preference?
I would just soon put it in the right fund,
Yeah.
but
So I think we'll withdraw the motion that's pending. Let's go
Please.
back to this fund, and I'd entertain a motion to transfer this 2.3 to the appropriate fund.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, as a part of that, we've got a little, unless we change things up, we're going to have a little deficit in SIPA. And so as part of that move, I would recommend that this 2.3 million come out of general fund as opposed to SIPA.
Okay, that fixes that 2 for 1. Everyone understand the motion? And then the question is, do we need some type of balance in this account? We'll come back to that next, separate. Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries. Can you just explain to Representative Stith what we just did?
Yes, please.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, the committee approved $2.3 million in general funds to be deposited in the State Building Commission contingency fund for purposes of level 1, level 2 studies.
What unit is that?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have a numbered unit for this. We will just call it state building
Okay.
contingency.
Okay, do we have a motion on what we want to leave this blank for now and come back to it? Or do you want to put some money in? Okay, is there a motion to close?
Well, my question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, my question then back to Dawn is we had some conversation earlier that perhaps we need to look at our some of the capital construction projects at the community colleges and put an additional amount on them for cost increases. Is this flex fund where that goes to, or do we just put that in the individual? Because there could be a global move there, right? In community. Yeah.
There's a value to making it a global motion versus a percentage per project, because we don't know, each project might have a different number. And whatever number is, that's what they're going to spend. Whereas if we allow it based upon actual costs and trying to stay within costs, we might get a lower cost. at the end of the day.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm just needing clarification, Dawn, is if we looked at the community colleges, would we do them individually? Or would we, to enhance them, or would we put that in a contingency fund here? I just need direction on where to make my motion.
Mr. Chairman, historically, you have put it in each community college, primarily because of the matching funds and how who addresses the cost overrun, whether it's the state or the local or a share.
Very good. Very good. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, are we back on, if we're on this flex fund, I would make the motion to increase the balance of this account by $5 million. To the flex, right.
Just so it has a balance in it for any, and Don, then if we put it in this account, it can be used for any state construction building.
Mr. Chairman, that's the language, yes, any state construction building.
Has there been a consistent number of what this is in this account over time?
Mr. Chairman, it has been uneven, to say the best. Over the last 10 years, you made an appropriation of 3.4 million in 2010, 1.7 million in 2014, and then a large appropriation last year of 11 million.
And this is in line with, just sharing with the committee, this is in line with last year's large appropriation as we move forward on that particular project, trying to finish it out.
Mr. Chairman, I think this makes all the sense in the world, given the fact that we know historically, whatever number we put in there, when the bids come out, there's usually very little difference between the top and the bottom for a lot of reasons. So all the more reason to drive a better opportunity to get actual construction costs versus what we budgeted, and leave that potential inflation fund where it's at. So I think this is just a wise move.
Okay, Don?
One clarification, is this out of conserved general funds? Is that what you said? Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Motion to close? Wait, we don't want you to do that. As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Next, Don?
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 25, unit 7021, A&I Barrett Building Security Improvements Level 3.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 29, unit 7031, A&I Hirschler Building Sound Masking System, Level 3 Design and Construction.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 33, unit 7041, Hathaway Building, 4th floor, Level 3 Design and Construction.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 37, unit 7051, A&I Equipment, Pole Barn at Liquor Warehouse Division.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to increase the amount, make a motion to increase the amount from 60,000 to 70,000. If I get a second, I'll explain the purpose.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of that is, in the request, it is to put a pea gravel floor in this building. And I just think we really don't want to have a nice new building with a dirt floor in it. And so for $10,000, I think we would be able to put a concrete floor in that building and it would have a more useful purpose. So that's the reason for the increase.
Discussion? Don?
Mr. Chairman, is out of SIPA the same source?
SIPA for now, we'll true up later.
Okay.
Or
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Mr. Chairman,
aye.
Do we need language to direct that this is a concrete floor?
That's,
Don,
Mr. Chairman, we can do so with a footnote.
please.
Mr. Chairman, is there a reason we wouldn't just direct that, just conversation between me and my neighbor here, that we just wouldn't make that move now that it'd be a general fund source?
conserved general funds. I guess actually, before I say that, Mr. Chairman, a larger discussion is if we're going to have several little spins on this, at the end of the
It could be a
discussion,
true
do we
up.
want to just do a true up of conserved general funds
Okay.
to make up the difference as opposed to always saying that at each project? So for now, I would say SIPA, and then we'll true up at the end of the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
doesn't this just come out of their revenue, which anything in excess of it flows into the general fund? Why would we take an agency that's on special revenue and start taking it out of SIPA? They just take it out of their liquor profits, don't they?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
all of their liquor profits go to the general fund.
Right.
And so really all we're doing is I think it's simpler accounting to pay for capital construction out of capital construction side of the house, funded via the way we fund it, and let the enterprise flow that money to the general fund as it's already anticipated.
So, Mr. Chairman, the motion is to take the liquor barn out of SIPA. Is that right?
As we passed.
Correct.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, Don,
Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to vote as amended.
as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 41, unit 7061, snow removal asphalt pad at Liquor Division Warehouse.
So, Representative Walters, you want to comment on this again? Please,
Pardon me?
you want to comment on the asphalt?
Mr. Chairman, this is basically just an expansion of their parking lot. During the winter, they'll use it for asphalt. And they have already been directed to compare asphalt versus concrete. To really, it's a hard surface is what they're looking for to improve their drainage factors.
So my question was that if you have snow melt, you don't want to put it on asphalt because it'll.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, this has been a sliver in my backside since I've seen it because of that reason. And in discussing this with the Department of Construction, they says that they agree, they'll find the appropriate, they just put that there, that they agree that asphalt's not the thing. And so I had just left it alone after that.
So they just want to expand the parking.
Yeah. They want to create they want to create a space that they can stack snow. Right now, they don't have the area, the liquor warehouse is not conducive to any type of real snow storage, just because of the soils and the slope and stuff. And so they is going to do some civil work and then make that where they could do that.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
my recollection, I've been out there in probably a year and a half, but recollection is that, so they have that on the back part of the yard, it's just dirt. But as I think about that it's a negative slope towards the parking lot in the building if you stack it on there. That's the problem is that the problem? It's a drainage issue. And so when they stack it out there in the dirt, it just melts and then we end up with mud and other erosion and other issues in the parking lot.
Mr. Chairman, and I think adding to that, because of the reasons you just bring up, they don't stack it there. Instead, they stack it in their existing parking lot, which then takes up space for their delivery trucks, which are large semis, to get in and out and backed up to the facility. And so it's a compounding effect that takes place. And so it's just a creation of more space to address the snow
The
issue.
question is, are we going to approve the dollars and for some action, or are we going to approve asphalt to expand the driveway, the parking lot. That's what, I mean, we need to-
Mr. Chairman, so the motion is Guzerac, but I think we just add I would move that we would add a footnote that they just use that this money to be used to provide,
additional parking.
yeah, I think, to involve an appropriate resolution to the drainage and snow and the snow removal and drainage issues.
Okay, as amended with that footnote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those no, that motion carries. Right, next.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 45, unit 7071, new enlisted barracks, transient.
That's
training.
right. All those in favor say aye. Go ahead.
I had a note here from our discussion from the Senate. I think it came from our chairman, something about major maintenance. What was the question?
So the question on this one is, looking at the narrative, it looks like that this is expands the barracks out there. And so, and there's, I think there's another one right behind this for that's another one. And so my question is how much does that expand? How many square feet does it expand the square feet by I think it was 17,000 square feet, if I remember right, something like that. And what's the effect on major maintenance going forward with that? What will be the state's responsibility with respect to its share of maintenance and major maintenance going forward?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the additional square foot would be included in the next iteration after completion of the project in the major maintenance. So if we have a 2%, then those square footage would receive those 2%.
And so, and Kevin, Mr. Chairman, my question to Kevin would be so what is on the maintenance issues for these buildings, there's a federal and state cost share. And so I'm assuming that the number we would be doing is $2 a square foot, at least that's what would be in this budget. So what's the cost share of that with feds on these barracks?
Mr. Chairman, in the narrative, it says that these buildings will be at 100% federal. So
Right, but the maintenance obligation is different.
all operations and maintenance, 100% federally funded.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate that.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, in the governor's letter, he did ask that this project be effective immediately.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
that brings up my question. Yesterday, we passed Governor's Letter 3, indicating that items in that governor's letter 1, 3, and 4, which were Camp Guernsey Barracks, Evansville Cemetery, and Camp Guernsey Administration, were effective immediate. So do we need to take further action today to double down and make sure that it's effective immediate, or because of our action yesterday, is all of that already taken care of?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's already taken care of. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Yes.
Do we need to do anything on this?
Chairman, I think maybe we should include, so we know that they really know that we.
Yes means yes.
Yes means yes.
Go ahead.
Just a question for Kevin to clear this up, because some of us heard it differently from the military department. So I just want to make sure we got this. This money goes for Camp Guernsey and there will be no major maintenance from general fund dollars for it. Is that what I just heard you say?
Mr. Chairman, on page 44 in the narrative and the performance justification, C states all ongoing operational and maintenance costs for the facility will be 100% to the state from the federal government. That's what the narrative says. So I'm going off the narrative. My experience has been that when we expand square footage, community colleges, I think it's obvious, in University of Wyoming, that would be that in the expansion of square footage, it would expand the major maintenance.
So Don, I think we need another footnote on this to memorialize that this is being approved under the condition that ongoing major maintenance are covered by federal dollars. Okay? Is that a friendly amendment?
Mr. Chairman, while we're on this subject, and the reason I was asking those questions is, it was, I mean, I think it was, I can't remember what day it was, yesterday or the day before, but we were talking about in the military department, and we had allowed general fund dollars to go into maintenance issues. And that's why, so I was, that's what kind of put me in the impression that somehow we were allowing general fund dollars, I think reversion numbers, to be used for some maintenance issues. And so that led me, from there, I assumed that there was some kind of cost sharing. That's where I came from.
So, Mr. Chairman, the conversation that we had and the request for the agency for the footnote is to allow the reverted portion of major maintenance to be, well, unused major maintenance, because I don't think major maintenance actually reverts. For routine maintenance, changing oil and compressors or air conditioners, that sort of things. As you get closer to the major maintenance rule set that's provided by the state construction department, once you pass or eclipse that, you can use your major maintenance funds. But there's things that the department wants to do for routine maintenance. And back in 2016, I think it was 2016, the scarcity funds, we wanted to be able to continue to do our routine maintenance, but we didn't have any money. So what we said was, ask for a request to be able to use their major maintenance or a portion of that unused for routine maintenance. That's what the footnote request is. Now we have a request into the military department to provide us what the routine maintenance statistic actually is. Not what they anticipated major maintenance carryover and all that business, just what the routine maintenance need is, and what that would be as far as state and federal funds, how that would be delineated. And we're waiting on that response.
So, Mr. Chairman, so is the difference is that out at Guernsey and the fact that this is so much training goes on out there, that's fully federally funded and paid for, both the construction, the maintenance. But in the armories, is that the difference, that there is some match in? Is that the difference between this and the Guernsey and the armory?
Yes, I believe that there's a differential between what facility that you're identifying in and what the relationship with federal funds will be.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Please, Erica.
I just was texting General Porter and he said for the building of that it would be 100% federal funds. And then he said future maintenance will also be federal funds.
Okay. We're going to make sure of it. Okay, as amended, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration, very similar. It appears on page 49, unit 7081. This is new enlisted barracks transient training 2023. So this is the second component of this.
As amended previously with the same language, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries. Next on.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 53, unit 7101. This is the AG Law Academy, expand and replace target system and retaining wall.
That's right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 57, unit 7111, AG Law Academy, facility door locks and security.
That's right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 61, unit 7121, the Attorney General Law Academy, rebuild level 3 design and construction.
That's right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 65, moving into state parks and cultural resources. This is the SRA outdoor recreation, maintenance, and health and safety. These are special revenue funds.
That's right. All those in favor, go ahead.
related to Hot Springs.
You appropriated what, three? You appropriated three for Housekeeping State Park to renovate and I don't know, is this a reversion?
That's 500,000.
Well, I had there was a, excuse me, I slept since yesterday.
No, no.
Yeah, it's off, no, huh? But there was something about on the lease. There was a lease and it was about on the current lease about being month to month. It was an old footnote that was formerly on there.
Don?
Mr. Chairman, this is a different issue and a different footnote. Last year's footnote said, of this other funds appropriation, $3 million special revenue is appropriated for facility remedies of concessionaires within Hot Springs State Park as determined by the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. So this is the building capacity. The footnote that you approved yesterday was the month-to-month opportunity for the concessionaires, the operating side.
All right.
Continue this or not.
Okay. I think so let's say we took care of that yesterday.
On the
left one?
concessionaire part, but not on the construction.
So. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
so we want to,
Excuse me.
I guess a little confused. We want to continue this footnote, or did we appropriate the money last year and we don't need to? I'm trying.
Well, Mr. Chairman, great question. I assumed that when we made that footnote last year of the amount appropriated, $3 million is to improve that. I would just make the assumption that that's now committed to do that, whether it's all completed yet or not, it's committed to do that. Do we need to carry that forward, Don?
Mr. Chairman, if you choose to add a footnote, it would mean an additional $3 million would be going for that concessionaire. So a total of 6.
Could just make a note to find out if in fact the dollars were spent the way they were directed in our last budget. And if not, that's something we can fix later. Okay.
Out that there is a retained balance of $3 million if they haven't done that within their special revenue account.
Okay, going back to the Gov's rec as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 69, unit 7141, Wyoming Territorial Prison Authorization.
Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed,
No.
motion carries. Next,
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 73, unit 7151, Water-Related Facilities, State Parks and Cultural Resources.
Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 77, unit 7161, Quebec 1 Missile Site.
Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 81, Department of Fire Prevention and Electrical Safety, Riverton, Level 3.
Gov's
Design.
rec, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed,
No.
that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 85, unit 7181, Boys School Facility Maintenance Storage Facility.
Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, we're now moving into the community college requests. The first one appears on page 89, unit 7191, Western Wyoming Community College, or excuse me, Central Wyoming Community College, Jackson Outreach Center.
Gov's rec, all those, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz first.
Oh. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Question for Don and then larger question. We've talked about this numerous times. It's the one project that's out there for the community colleges that really does fit the ARPA dollar quotient, letter for letter, basically, for what it's doing, for what it's housing. So the question is for the committee, could we, or should we, can we put this project, leave this project in Capcom, but commit ARPA direct dollars to it? that way we could free up the general fund dollars that are committed. But to be honest, I don't want to do it if it's going to go into another pool, if it's not going to stay right here. If it's going to stay right here, forget everything I said just up to this moment. But just trying to save $18 million of general fund that we could use somewhere else and use ARPA dollars because this does qualify.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Rue just convinced me that it should stay on general fund dollars and not take a chance on ARPA. You've been waiting too long for this
I
project.
think that's what
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good approach, but I think we appropriate, and these are SIPA dollars, I believe, appropriate SIPA with a footnote that we pursue the ARPA direct funding and use it first if possible.
I bow to your wisdom.
Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, we had Clifton Larson Allen review the CapCon and the school projects as well. The only project that came close to qualifying for ARPA Direct was the Veterans Home, but then that gets us into entanglements of federal match. So that one even wouldn't qualify for ARPA Direct.
So, Mr. Chairman, follow up. So Kevin, as we've looked at that, so they're looking at health education, the CNA component, the other things that this is being built for, and that doesn't qualify.
Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding. And if you'd like me to go into the component breakout and have a deeper review of that, we can consider that. But the original response was it did not qualify for ARPA Direct.
So just to follow up on that, at some point, on some projects, I think we're going to want to look at a component concept of it and have Clifton Larson look at that. The other thing is, we don't want to get into that same box that we did last year with CARES Act, where had we said ARPA, we might have had some of these projects already funded. And so if in fact there are new guidance that comes out for ARPA between now and the end of the next biennium, we want to be able to be flexible. And so we probably, it seems to me, it would behoove us to put in flexible language on anything we want to that may possibly fall under it based upon future guidance.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, Governor's Letter 17 would be a good place to have that flexibility provided, not only for these, but all things related to ARPA Direct, revenue assistance, and also the conservative general funds. That flexibility that was discussed earlier in the week, that would be an opportune place for that would be in the governor's letter. And then it would be expansive across everything, not just CapCon, but everything we look at, if you modify that letter.
So Dom, let's just make a note that we evaluate that and maybe get some proposed language on what that would be. So we have the opportunity to tailor it as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Please, Senator.
Gov's rec,
Mr. Chairman. I have an
What's
amendment.
that?
Governor's rec.
Governor's rec. All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment, and this really goes back to what we did a year ago. We know these costs have risen, and the contingency side of these projects is built into them independently. And so I'll repeat this motion if successful on this one for the next several. But I would move for a 7.5% increase to the total project cost, and then the same proportionate breakout for each entity that is already proposed. If I get a second, I'll explain.
Second.
So for example, we are talking about the Jackson Outreach School. And currently on page 56, or excuse me, 86, it shows that it's an $18.6 million project. So we would increase that total value by 7.5%. But it would still remain a 50-50 match with the state and the locals, just as we have done in the past. So that is the intent of the motion. And it's to cover the fact that from when these numbers were first, these are numbers that that this committee came up with a year ago based on an inflationary cost from the original proposal from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago. And so it's really just trying to true them up and get somewhere in the ballpark of where the real costs are going to be, as opposed to having our heads blinded by the fact that costs haven't risen.
Mr. Chairman, a question. I thought that was the rationale when we put that additional 5 million into that superflex fund. And so my question would be, if we're going to do that, why wouldn't we just raise that number up other than go back there and index these for inflation? That's a question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. There's reason for that is the proposal is to index these for inflation to actually get to a number that we think is realistic, so that so that our starting point is actually a truer number. The point of the flex that we discussed earlier in the day is if these projects then have further overruns, say they start working on it and they find out that they're building on a old missile site or something, and the soils are extremely contaminated, that they did not know, and they did great due diligence, but they've come across something that adds to the cost of the project that was just an unknown, soils full of asbestos, which we have experienced in real recent construction projects that have to be abated, and those abatements come in higher. Those sorts of things that are unanticipated outside of all due diligence, that is where those flex dollars then come in and help cover the cost. This is just to try and factor in really where the true cost is, to try and get us to a good starting point, as opposed to saying we're going to start way behind the 8 ball and then expect some other fund to make up for it.
Mr. Chairman, just discussion, it seems to me like if we're going to go down, rather than trying to index each one of these projects, what we may want to do is just put another component in there and list the number of projects that are eligible for construction inflation contingency. Again, I'm cognizant of that. This one may be significantly more cost effective or escalation in cost because of the location versus someplace other that might actually come in a little bit lower, is to allow that flexibility to move from project to project within whatever that inflationary cost is, versus just index every one of them at the same level. But that's just a thought process, Mr. Chairman.
And so Senator Hicks, you'll recall when I made that motion earlier in that contingency flex fund, that was part of the discussion. I was trying to, between LSO and Tom, trying to figure out where we would put that money in, and thought that could we put it globally in there along with that for the projects that are currently under construction, and was given guidance that it belonged here individually is the way we took it. So we kind of had that discussion previously and settled. I thought at that time that we would do them per project based upon the estimated cost of the project.
Please.
And so, Mr. Chairman, I mean, obviously the issue, we've had this discussion many times on construction projects, and that's ultimately what we do is we just create, I get concerned that we create our own inflation, that we keep raising these prices and the prices keep coming up. And so, and I don't know why it would be 7%, why not 5%? I mean, we all recognize what's happened in building costs over the last little while, and we don't know how that's going to affect each individual projects. We did something very similar in our school construction efforts just a few days ago. We kind of did a global thing, and why wouldn't we take, for example, 5% of the projects that we approve and put it in a separate fund or put it into the building construction, the construction division,
Flex fund.
and in a flex fund, and just let them use it and like I say, designate it for these projects. So we quit chasing our tail on this thing. We just keep signaling out to the contractors what those numbers are.
And Mr. Chairman, I think we're all on the same page. It's just the mechanism to do it. So
you know, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, so any of these construction projects automatically factor in a 10% contingency. So if we didn't do a little inflation last year, actual true cost may come in what's actually in the budget because there's a 10% contingency already built into those processes. I just think it would be a good idea to just do a global and lump in what we think, put that in a, I do think we, based on the previous discussion, would need to make sure that we'd had a footnote there that says any contingency, inflationary contingency funds is still on a 50-50 split. So we're not going to fund 100% of the cost of any inflationary cost.
Mr. Chairman, the SBC's recommendation is 55-45, and the governor's rec Paul is aligned with that. That 55 being state, 45 being local funds. I believe historically that differential is anticipation of anything that moves on the award of the contract, meaning the state is going to manage that differential, similar to what you're suggesting on as far as the flex fund.
So Kevin, as I understand, that's already built in, right? What you're telling me, if we put this in account for
Mr. Chairman,
inflation contingency.
I believe so, and that's why we're at 55 state, 45 local. So let's imagine that it comes in exactly what we think it is. Then the state's not necessarily going to have to come up with that 10%. But I think that's why we have 55-45 share. My point here is just to say, hey, the recommendation is 55-45 from the state versus the local.
For consistency.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw my original motion if the second would concur.
I agree.
And I'll make a new motion for 7.5% of the total project cost of Central Wyoming Community College, Northwest Community College, Western Wyoming Community College, and Northern Community College, and then Northwest Community College. It's the 4 projects. And set that aside in a separate fund called Community College Construction Contingency. I don't know if they can access it.
Second.
That's what I'm trying to get the answer to.
So
Thank you. I'm just getting clear on the motion. You're creating a new account.
I'm creating a new community college contingency account.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
so I understand the motion, and in light of the motion, but going back to what I thought I just heard Kevin say, is that the governor's recommendation went from a 50% match to a 55% match to cover this very issue. And maybe I missed the point.
Mr. Chairman, the SBC's original recommendation is 55-45. And the governor then followed the SBC's recommendation, the same 55-45. It's my understanding that that differential is because of what may happen in the actual award of the contract, and the state would be in position to pick that up.
So the way I interpret, Mr. Chairman, the way I interpret what Kevin just said was that by moving to 55-45, you're already anticipating a 5% increase on the state share. And so there's an extra 5% already on each of these projects based upon the governor's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe there's a contingency in the overall project, and the split is 55-40.
Mr. Chairman, I'll add some confusion and clarity at the same time. If you go to this same project and move to page 87, it breaks out that project. So the way these projects work is they are on a 50-50 split for the project. And then the state, as per statute 21-18-25 little g, these projects are required to carry a 10% contingency allowance. The state carries the contingency on the project. So when that takes place, then it makes it a 45-55 split with the state carrying a little bit more. But the project itself, when you look at the private revenue raise requirement, works out to be 50-50. That is how that works. That 10% contingency is to cover, yes, cost overruns for inflation, but it's also to cover all other issues that come up within construction. And that is a requirement we put in as a legislature, and that is where those numbers come from.
So, Mr. Chairman, that being said, I would concur with Representative Walters. That 10% was a number that was based on last year's budget. I still think that there's probably a need to go ahead and set up a inflation contingency fund that would still operate under a 45-55 split. I'm really concerned we're going to get to the end of this thing and there's just not going to be enough money. We're looking at another 6 or 7% inflation this year.
Mr. Chairman, I think the addendum to my amendment is that it would be a 50-50 split. Any inflationary costs that come out of this new account would be shared on a 50-50 basis with the private end or with the local entity.
Second.
Moving second, and further discussion.
Mr.
Tom?
Chairman. No, Mr. Chairman, just a question. So then, does this new community college contingency fund, what happens to it when all the projects are finished and there's money in it? Where does that money go? Does it stay there forever? What happens?
Mr. Chairman, it just sits there until this committee decides to make a recommendation to reappropriate it for another purpose.
Probably will
Would be-
carry on for a long time.
Well, it's in the budget. Yeah, it'll just sit there until we do something. Don, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, two clarifications. Number one, we will increase all of the private revenue by their share of this 50-50. And do you want the 7.5% based on, for example, on page 87, the original cost of 16.67 or the new cost of 18.67?
The new cost of 18.67.
Thank you.
And that would go through all of the other projects. It would be that new cost.
Including QW?
It's already.
There's that term.
We know where that trap line goes.
Okay, everyone understand the motion? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Now, Gov's rec on the project I tried. to-
As amended, Gov's rep. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 98, unit 7211, Rock Springs Nursing Facility. And I understand that Representative Walters' prior motion also applies to this.
Representative Stitt.
Mr. Chairman, I would have a motion to add a footnote that the college would be authorized to either use these funds for design and construction or to enter into a long-term commercial lease if it turns out that's more economically efficient.
Second.
Moving second, discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 102, unit 7221, Sheridan College Center for Technology and Applied Science.
221. All those, Gov's rec, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Actually, it's as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, we skipped one inadvertently. I apologize. On page 94,
Thank you.
94.
unit 7201, Northwest Community College Student Center.
Gov's rec as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 106, unit 7241, UW College of Law Clinical and Experiential Learning Facility. And I believe Senator Hicks had a comment.
Go ahead, Representative.
So-
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, given our last discussion, I would make a motion that we include the law college with the War Memorial and the Corbett as a block grant to the university, that those three projects would be eligible. And that we would make an appropriation of $49,285,000, and we index a 7% inflation factor on that. So the total appropriation would be $50 million for those three projects, including that inflation factor.
So I think the inflation factor is 7.5%.
So, Mr. Chairman, for clarity, are you just saying $50 million block grant to the university?
That's exactly what I'm
let's make
saying,
it simple.
Representative.
With the 7.5% inflation factor.
That was already calculated in. So
It's
with the
already
seven,
included.
with the 7.5%, the total would come up to a $50 million block grant, which would include the 7.5% inflation factor.
Well, I would make a friendly amendment and remove 7.5 inflation factor because it's not. If you were, because we're not inflating a number. So if you want to do a block grant for 50 million, that makes more sense.
So it is a $50 million block grant, Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
just for clarification.
okay.
And those three projects would be eligible for expenditure under there and require at least a 1-to-1 match.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd like to further amend that. And it was just simply to add language,
Go ahead.
simply to add footnote language.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we voted on that.
This is a separate amendment.
Further, so is this a further
This-
amend?
Further amendment to the block grant concept that just passed.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is the block grant just passed, or block grant concept just passed.
Correct.
And so now I'm amending what's available now with language. And that language is really the same language that we used for the High Altitude Performance Center about the 1-to-1 match, but then the 1-to-1 match can come from any sources within the university. And then a discussion of, and I won't bore you with all the details because Don has all this language, but it's about the state treasurer transferring those funds based on binding commitments.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, Don.
Mr. Chairman, one clarification on this, the funding source for the $50 million, was that out of SIPA or?
I would agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you've addressed, although you can elect to further motions on page 110, unit 7251, UW War Memorial West Stands.
How do we deal with that? In fact, that's included in the block grant.
Mr. Chairman, I think a appropriate motion would gov's rec and ask you to vote no.
Okay. Gov's rec.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
That motion fails. Next.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 114, unit 7261, AMK Ranch renovations.
Gov's rec.
What was denied?
Then no. Yeah, I think the gov's rec was denied, wasn't it?
It was.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 118, unit 7271, UW Roundabout at 22nd Street and Willett.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, page 118, and the governor's recommendation is to deny.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 122, unit 7281, College of Ag Research and Extension Centers.
That's right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion.
Well,
carries.
wait. So the gov's rec was approval from SIPA?
Yep.
Okay, all right. We voted.
Okay, back on the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no? No. It's a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. All
We're
those
on the-
opposed? All those opposed? That motion fails. That's done.
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 126, unit 7291, UWIT network upgrades.
Govs all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
That motion fails. Next,
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 130, unit 7301, UW College of Education component of lab school renovation.
this was denied by the Gov. All those in favor of the Govs say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion passes. Next,
Mr. Chairman, the next unit for your consideration appears on page 134, unit 7311, UW Albany County School.
And the
Govs
Govs was denial.
right.
Okay, thank you.
All those-
Govs
Govs all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the last capital construction project in the governor's recommendation appears on page 138, unit 7321, Wyoming Department of Health Veterans Home.
Govs all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries. And any other,
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that in all instances where we have designated SIPA and we run out of SIPA, that the overage be covered by conserved general fund.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. And by the way, just so the committee knows, what we intend to do is when we're finished with this, we'll go through all of the SIPA recommendations and true it up. And also, if we want to do some redistributing, we'll take that up as well. Okay. Don,
Mr. Chairman,
as amended, Capcom bill. All those in
Mr.
favor
Chairman.
say aye. Go ahead.
on my spreadsheet, I have the Oregon Trail Cemetery and Camp Guernsey admin. Okay, thank you.
Anything else in Capcom bill? We need to close it? Yeah. Okay, motion to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that motion carries. Okay, we'll take a short break.
You want to take a, why don't you do roll call?
10 minutes. Proceed with technical issues, is that correct?
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, I'll take these in agency order. And some of them you may just wish to defer, or you can say, cross this off, or that sort of thing. Some agencies have responded to our inquiries. We do have some that are still outstanding. When you left the State Treasurer's Office, Agency 4, there was a question about whether or not to continue any investment reporting or reconciliation of cash.
I think the motion was to continue it. Is my recollection.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that was the existing report that you are receiving on a monthly basis. There was also discussion of whether or not you wanted a reconciliation of cash on a quarterly basis.
On a quarterly basis. And yeah, and I thought that was either going to be a round robin or some other component. I think the co-chair and I will probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, Mr. Chairman, the committee also, at the time of markup in the State Treasurer's Office, wanted to revisit their HR request. You did have Director Bach come in and visit about that as well. No action taken on State Treasurer's Office, but.
So my understanding from Director Bach is that she was in the process of having discussions with, and was planning to continue those discussions with having a placement of a personnel in that office. Is that your impression?
That's kind of what I remember. They're having ongoing discussions. And the other thing I think that I remember too is when the deputy treasurer came by, that they had also made that switch where they, I mean, I think what I remember from testimony was that they were actually, the HR person was actually doing a number of administrative tasks. And so they had reclassified one person as administrative assistant. So I think most of those administrative tasks have been picked up, a significant number of them. And then we also did a reclassification because they had a classified accountant out and we reclassified an accountant in. So I think that some of those issues have been resolved. They're still, they still need HR, and I think, and then I think that my co-chairman is right that there's continuing discussions between the treasurer's office and the A&I about the location and maybe putting an office back in there. And I think those discussions are continuing to go.
Okay. The next agency, Department of Administration and Information. The committee wanted to revisit a discussion regarding a floor and a ceiling for the actuarial assessment of the risk management account.
And I think that was and we've got that back. As we got that information back, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you have an email from Tamara regarding the EGI, Employees Group Health Insurance. I don't believe I've had a chance to see anything from the risk management.
Yeah, my recollection is we asked, number one, for the report, to see the report, but also have her give a recommendation on what a floor should be.
And Mr. Chairman, the report has been circulated. That report does not include actuarial evaluation.
Okay, and so, yeah, okay, and I didn't see this. I've got it from, today's Wednesday, right? From last night. There's a Trish and Director Bach sent an email last night with some suggested language. So let's just take a minute and look at that. It
What
came
time
at
did you see
8:27 last night. I got one. But I don't see you on the list, Mr. Co-Chair.
I'm not.
Let me forward this to you. Let's see. Elizabeth, you got this too. Can you just forward that to everybody on JC? Did you find it, Elizabeth? 8.7, okay. Fine.
And Mr. Chairman, this language, again, relates to the EGI, which will be discussed this afternoon. I think we're still waiting for the risk management response.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps this one you could address. There was some discussion about the information desk attendant, which you denied. And I believe LSO director.
Yeah, we need to visit with the LSO director about that. In talking with the LSO director, some interest that that person might be, but you know, the question is whether that's an MOU between LSO and the Department of A&I, with that person being an A&I, or that person being an LSO and being and having an MOU between LSO and A&I. So that's the issue, and I had some really brief discussions with the director about that before we started these discussions. We just need to follow up with the director and see where he's at on that.
Mr. Chairman, just to paraphrase our conversation this morning, he indicated that if the committee desires, we can draft a section 300, which would provide an MOU as you direct, if you so desire.
Did he? That was Matt.
Yes.
And did have they decided whether they want that as an LSO employee or they want that as an A&I employee?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it was an A&I employee in our last conversation.
Chairman, if we can't, we take that one, and we just, what we'll do is we'll just, so, well, I guess we do have to wait. We have to wait for the round robin, I guess, because we'll have to reopen that budget and deal with that Gov's rec. Can we do it? Can we do it now?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we reopen A&I and a B unit.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carried.
And so what we have is I think the Gov's rec, and I think the Gov's rec already provided for the MOU, if I remember right.
Mr. Chairman, this would appear on page 61. It's the capital information desk attendant position. The request was for $157,829 general fund. You initially had denied this request. If you wanted to approve it and require an MOU, you could do that, or some other.
You said that was page 61?
61 and 62, agency 006.
Okay, yeah, and so, yeah, so that's, what we want to do is require an MOU between A&I and LSO regarding the coordination of the coordination with respect to legislative spaces and LSO functions. And the reason I bring that up is the docent program is under the LSO, and so there's a significant amount of coordination that will be required. Make sure that the docents and all that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, and equally, or just as important is, some of these spaces are basically considered legislative spaces. And so and some are executive spaces. And it's important because what happens in those spaces, we want to make sure we continue to have control over it and not the executive branch. So,
And the executive branch needs control over their spaces, so.
So, Mr. Chairman, just so I understand when we get into a motion here, we have already denied or reduced the governor's request by $157,000, correct? And so,
So the motion is to approve that funding with with a footnote requiring the MOU.
That's right.
Okay, does everyone understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That
No.
motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, you also asked,
As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
no,
Go ahead, Don.
Mr. Chairman, in the same agency, you also asked, while it's open, to revisit the EGI and a potential footnote. I think based on the discussion of the section 300 and the bill forthcoming this afternoon, I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, I think the bill will resolve it if the bill passes.
Mr. Chairman, that's it for agency 6, if you wanted to close
Move to
that.
close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, agency 7, you provided $3 million for routine maintenance. And we have reached out to the military department, haven't received a response, but the state budget department has done some work identifying prior expenditures in routine maintenance. And I'll either let Kevin speak or summarize.
Mr. Chairman, in 2019, and we shared the documents with LSO in the budget request 2019 that precipitated the flexibility from major maintenance to be used, a portion of that for routine maintenance. The agency had requested $800,000 in their air guard unit, $200,000 of general fund, and $600,000 of federal funds. They were provided $50,000 of general funds. They also have in their state affairs budget a request for $800,000 for routine maintenance, all general funds. So a total ask of $1 million in general fund for routine maintenance, with $600,000 on air guard side with federal funds.
So given that, it really doesn't change anything or require us to do anything different. That's just kind of an update of data, right?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think the takeaway from that analysis, not having information from the military department, is the $3 million that you have appropriated is about 3 times higher than the prior biennium's routine maintenance needs.
Well, yeah.
So what I think I just heard is that we've got $2 million of excess general fund appropriated for that purpose. And so I think what we can do is, if I understand, right, we can reduce that appropriation for 1 million. And then do we need to also authorize the federal funds, or is that already done?
Mr. Chairman, no, I do not believe that it has been done. And then that's still lacking any updates from the military department upon our request. So they still haven't responded to giving us today's data.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to reopen agency 7.
So before we do that,
My plan is that we'll just go ahead and make this adjustment. And if that's not correct, I'm sure the military department will be very eager to help us correct that.
well, our primary costs are on the armory side, which would be the military department, aren't they?
Mr. Chairman, I think that was in consideration on the affairs side on the other $800,000 asked in 2019.
Okay, go ahead.
Kevin, am I misunderstanding?
Mr. Chairman, we have a request into the military department to provide us recent statistics on what their routine maintenance need is and broken out by funding source, general fund or federal funds. Lacking that information, we researched the request that drove the flexibility for the major maintenance. In that request, we discovered in 2019 that they had an $800,000 request for routine maintenance in the Air National Guard side, $200,000 of general fund and $600,000 of federal funds. And in the admin's portion of the budget, they had requested $800,000 of general funds. That was in 2019. That's what their routine maintenance request was when we provided the flexibility to allow them to use a portion of their major maintenance for routine maintenance.
Right, and so the combination of those is then 1 million general fund and 800,000 federal, 600,000.
Correct.
But the general fund combined total is nine.
Yeah, the
Correct.
general fund combined total is 1 million, and we've got 3 million in the budget. But we don't have an authorization for the 600,000 of federal funds, I don't think. Is that, am I understanding that right, Don?
Mr. Chairman, I believe you are. However, the military department has never asked for that. So recall the initial request that you were working on was a request to carry over unspent major maintenance funds. There was never a request for any additional federal funds.
Mr. Chairman, then I misunderstood. I thought you said that there was a $3 million request.
No, Mr. Chairman, you denied the request to carry over major maintenance funds and inserted $3 million of new general funds in lieu of the carryover authority.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, now I'm clear.
Okay, motion to reopen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we reduce the general appropriation for maintenance, the general fund appropriation for maintenance we had for 3 million to $1 million, and also add authorization for another $600,000 in federal funds for maintenance.
So it's-
Mr. Chairman, that would be in line with their 2019 request.
Okay, everyone understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Motion as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Motion to close, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Next, Don.
Mr. Chairman, next is the Department of Agriculture, and I think there are one issue here. You had provided $50,000 in special revenue, anticipating a $50,000 transfer from the Board of Tourism. In the subsequent day, you denied the tourism's use of those funds. So we need to back that out in the Department of Agriculture, Agency 10.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. We have a motion.
Don, what page is that?
Mr. Chairman, it was actually a handout. It was not part of their original budget.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we reduce the Department of Agriculture budget by $50,000 in appropriate location.
All those in favor say aye.
Just clarifying though, and that would be, I think that was a transfer from the
Correct. Tourism.
the tourism account. So, okay, we're in the right, all right. Go ahead.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Motion to close. Anything, well, no, we want to keep this open. There's a couple other
No,
ag things. No,
that's it for ag.
motion to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, in response to committee requests for the Representative Stiff motion on Agency 15, this is the Attorney General position. We did go back and look and see if there was any difference between the cost of an FTE versus a cost to an AWEC. And we've calculated a reduction of $35,180 if those AWECs are not part of the Wyoming retirement system. So it would be a reduction of the stiff motion in the amount of $35,180 if the committee so desires.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Okay, motion to open. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. The motion as repeated or stated by Don and adopted by Representative Stiff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Motion to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, in Agency 24, you yesterday you adopted a $2 million appropriation from the Board of Tourism. And that those monies would be transferred to the State Parks and Cultural Resources. And now the State Parks and Cultural Resources does not have authority to spend that additional $2 million. So they need an appropriation of $2 million SR to spend the money that will be forthcoming from the Board of Tourism. Kind of the
Motion to
reverse of
open.
what happened with that.
Motion to open. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, that motion carries.
No.
Motion is to authorize $2 million of special revenue for the state parks, specifically for the outdoor rec component. All those in.
Mr. Chairman,
Stiff.
I apologize for just not quite understanding. I've got in my notes that we had taken out $2 million out of state parks. And so what does this do?
No, we required matching. of-
We had, I think we put 4 million in.
Right,
That's fine.
it's 4 million total, right? We moved to match 2 million in state parks of what they have, and we're authorizing them the expenditure of the 2 that we're taking from tourism. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, question. So we're authorizing to spend the two. All funds generated, those from the Office of Tourism and those that are matched. Right?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. My understanding of the motion is that you had approved the 2 million with a matching component in the Board of Tourism, but you had denied the corresponding transfer of those funds to state parks earlier in the day. And so now you're just truing it up with the 2 million so they can match those funds and use it.
Okay, everyone understand the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
That motion carried. Motion to close. Division called for. All those in favor? Oh, we don't need to know that. That motion passes. Score. Motion to close. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, in Agency 27, you eliminated the demolition of the building in Fremont County, you'll recall.
Oh, yeah.
And because you eliminated that, what you left in this, you don't have to fix this, but you left in the 6% unanticipated costs of that demolition. So if you wanted to take out the 6% unanticipated cost, meaning their contingency on that demolition, it would be a reduction of $239,855 in school CapCon.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'd suggest we leave this in because there's some other projects that it did not get calculated into. So there was already a discrepancy in that number. So I think for simplicity's sake, just leave it alone.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
question, does that property, that building that's removed out, and then I think the intent is to use it for other state agencies or whatnot. So does that come off as a burden to the school district, or does it still stay as a school district asset and calculated into their square footage?
Mr. Chairman, it would remain as a school district asset calculated. I believe there's one agency that is currently a tenant there, and they would continue to pay their state provided rent.
So, Mr. Chairman, just out of curiosity about that, I mean, we've and whether we do it something else or we've got flex funds, I mean, ultimately, the point is that the delay, the increased cost to the school and use of school, and also the allocation of major maintenance funds has to continue with that building. And so, but ultimately that building is no longer being used for school purposes, used for state purposes. And so what we're trying to figure out is what do you do now to relieve the burden from schools and move it over to where it's appropriate place? And it would seem to me that is there a way that, and this is a question for you, Don, or for you, Kevin, and what we obviously want to do is, without necessarily, we can't transfer ownership, but can we adjust through using flex funds from the SBC or something like that to where we don't appropriate money and don't require the school to maintain it and bring the responsibility to maintain that building under the SBC and also allow the demo of that stadium and football field to move forward. Is there a way that we can, that's the solution that we need to have, and how do we affect that?
Mr. Chairman, additionally, I just sent everyone on the committee a little bit of information that our staff researched in the last couple of days about what the state pays the district and a few other informational items on this facility, all for your information and perusal. Following up on that question, maybe this is for Kevin, if I may, Mr. Chairman, could the state buy that building from the district for, say, $1? And then there's been a legal transaction take place, and then the state would take over all ownership and deal with all necessary actions.
My guess is that the school district will want a quid pro quo for the value of at least the underlying property. Because it's on.
You buy the whole thing. I mean, full property.
Well, the district, Mr. Chairman, the district certainly has a concern that we've made this move, but they're still obligated to maintain the things that you lined out, Mr. Chairman. I think it would be prudent of us to try and rectify that somehow.
So, I mean, we have any idea, I mean, you're kind of over in that neck of the woods. We have any idea what the value of that building is?
I can find out.
We found out of that and what we have is the SBC has, we've got SBC has funds, and if we need to, maybe that's something else we could do. You could put a little bit more money in the flex fund, but when we can provide a solution to that. I mean, and I know you don't speak for the SBC, but I mean, ultimately that's where this thing's headed.
Mr. Chairman, generally, you do a look back on the original source of the funding, particularly if there's any federal funds that are in the beginning and if those have been depreciated out. That would be an exercise. I don't think it would apply here, but do a look back, and then naturally the value of the asset would be important as well. And then sale, purchase, or if you could consider, I'm not making a recommendation, that you could take it off the rolls of school SCCA major maintenance, put it on the rolls of state major maintenance. I mean, that's just an option to just move it from school foundation program or the flow of SCCA money to major maintenance from the school side over to the state side.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I think while this sorts its way out, that might be the right thing to do. Is just if we went back, we could go to the school major maintenance portion and we can just pull that out, and we just at the same time we add that to the maintenance obligation of the state of Wyoming with respect to the Tonkin building and then that auxiliary building. And then this will stuff get sorted out, and then SBC can act sometime in the next, I think that authority is already there to act. I think that's, like I say, that's where this is headed, but ultimately I would at least get the accounting side a little bit closer. So, Mr. Chairman.
That makes perfect sense to me. I think that Representative Larson is all over this.
Yeah, I'll get some suggestions from the district.
Oh, do you want, but
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
you want to do this now?
Yeah,
You want to make that? Go
Yeah.
ahead and make that motion.
make that motion. Second.
What is it?
Okay, you need.
The motion is to remove the obligation of the district for major maintenance and operation utilities, whatnot from this district, and have it then be the responsibility of the state.
Second for
And
and then discussion.
And then to look at options for sale of the building to,
sell or transfer or exchange.
yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Question, because, and maybe it's just a question because I'm trying to track this, but it looks to me like at some level, we're paying for the major maintenance on the building. And then we're also paying the school district for rent on the very building that we're also providing and funding for major maintenance. So it's kind of like a double down on the school district side of the equation. And so I'm wondering, where's the balance if we now assume all the major maintenance and we're still paying them rent because they own the facility? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So what am I missing?
I think that that's part of the whole conversation, Mr. Chairman. I think we have to clean that structure up. But first off is who's going to own it and whose responsibility of it is, and then straighten out the rest of it. If landlords have changed, now maybe we're the landlord. You meaning the state, not the school district.
Sure.
But I think we need to do that. But as it currently stands, we took an action that where they were preparing to have that come out of their obligation, and we forced it to stay in. And I'm just trying to take that first step to correct that.
So is
Mr.
it
Chairman,
and Mr. Chairman, if I can just follow up. So under that scenario, is it still a push?
well,
In other words,
Mr.
even if we take that obligation away, we're still paying rent.
Mr. Chairman.
So is it a push? But anyway, go ahead.
So, and that's a good point, but the other side of this equation is we're gonna go back in and we're gonna take out the major maintenance allocation. So that comes off the major maintenance roll for school foundations. So they'll lose their school maintenance. The rest of it,
All right.
I think they're still coming out a little bit ahead, but we're moving that step. So we're gonna have to go into 205, whatever. No, this isn't the budget bill. It's just a major maintenance in the budget bill.
027.
So we have to fix that.
Department of Construction, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for those that haven't read the memo yet, we're currently, the state is leasing for that one agency about 5,200 square feet out of the building. The building is approximately 60,000 square feet. We're paying $6,300, almost $6,400 a year for that lease. For further information, total leases in the city of Riverton, we have about 36,000 square feet of space leased. So if the state were to take over this building, we would have almost double the capacity that we're currently using in Riverton. So there may be some reasons not to want to pursue this because we'd end up with almost double the amount of space that we need due to the size of the building. So I just put that out there for thought, food for thought, as we proceed with this discussion. One last point is in 2020, in the Section 300s that included the school CapCon part of the bill, we appropriated 1.5 million for demolition of that building. I don't know that they moved forward. It was not vetoed or anything, so there is that money available. And then also in 2020, in Senate File 119, which was the state CapCon bill, there was 5.6 million for partial demolition and rehabilitation of this property. If you were to use the CPI, you'd add about 500,000 to that. So it would be about 6.1 million is what it would cost us today if we wanted to do what was contemplated in our 2020 discussions.
So was any of the money that we for rehabilitation used for the office building component of it to make it accessible and usable for state offices for the, like the 5,000 square feet we're leasing, or the remainder of it? Do we know?
That's the one part, Mr. Chairman, that I left out. Senate File 119, the CapCon bill did not pass that year. So none of that money was spent because it was never available due to lack of getting that bill through the entire process.
Well, and I've been in that building. It's been a while, but even back then, really all it was reconstituted classrooms that were turned into administrative space. And even then, I don't think the full building has been used since the high school closed, which was when I was in Riverton. So that was 25 years ago, 30 years ago. So there may not be a lot of value in the building itself. So I think what I'm saying is we probably need to move slowly to decide what we're going to do with this thing and have all the data that we can in front of us.
Mr. Chairman, the school district is still using the building
Are they?
a little bit, but they're in the process of moving all activities that they have in the building out as we speak.
That's right.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
it seems to me that maybe one of the things we need to do here is just look at a range of alternatives
Yeah.
at this point in time versus
Picking one.
picking. I don't know that we have all the best information available right now. What I would like to do is continue to see this thing move forward as one of the alternatives, but I think there, we may want to explore other potential alternatives that weren't considered in 2019 as an option.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I posed the initial question is just due to our actions, it obligated the school district to continue their oversight of it. And I'm just trying to make that initial correction in that. And so the motion on my amendment to this would be to put the responsibility for the maintenance and costs and obligations of the building onto the state. And then we can, as you say, move forward and look at options and how we best implement them.
Mr. Chairman, so representative on that motion, would that subtract out the state's current lease of the 5,208 square feet and that we would continue to do the footage for the rest?
Well, I think.
We're just doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I think we certainly could do that. And I think the intent from your perspective would be that then the payment to the school district from the Department of Education, once this is passed, would stop because it's not their building or not their obligation anymore. But I don't know the conditions of the lease and some of that language. And I think that we can correct that easy enough moving forward. I think that's kind of an A&I responsibility once it's their obligation to enter into the lessee's contractual discussion.
Mr. Chairman, it's probably at this point in time, not enough money to worry about the differential between those two. So
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would it be advisable for us to vote against this motion, reconsider the previous motion, and leave operations in place as they are today while we go out and research other alternatives, as opposed to convoluting who's paying for what and really confusing things unnecessarily? And you know, the district gets a little money out of it.
Let's just do nothing for a while.
But we know we want to go out and research our best options, and rather than, like I said, rather than really get in the way of ourselves, get out of the way of ourselves.
It's hard to do when you're.
Yeah,
you are
I mean,
where you are.
I think the first, yeah, so I'm, Mr. Chairman, I'm convinced that right now we just do nothing while we figure this out.
I withdraw my amendment
Leave it alone.
or my motion.
Please.
Even though we're going to withdraw them, we're not going to do anything. I haven't been on that site for 35 years, but ultimately the amount of land is far more significant than the space the building is on, correct? And what I don't know is how is that land connected to the future high school, or is this going to be isolated school district land?
There's Mr. Chairman, that parcel of land, which has their administration office, is still there on that parcel of land, but it can easily be segregated off, and the building that would be demolished is easily removed, and then bifurcating or otherwise dissecting the land is not a big deal. It's kind of an isolated block. Across one block, there's an elementary school, but it's 8 or 9 blocks from the high school. It's a ways. So, and I think Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time out on moving forward this. I think it's appropriate for us to get the opinion of the district and see the concerns that they have as well. Maybe we can not trip up ourselves.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're right. We also need to provide guidance to SBC to still out and develop a range of alternatives for consideration. If we just pull this off without further guidance as to what we're looking at, so Do we need a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I think, so the motion, I think, would be to the state construction department, not the SBC, but the state construction department to look and make recommendations back to the SBC on options and corrective measures and lease and land and things of that nature. Does that capture?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So just as an alternative, the other way to do this is just to have the chairman write a letter to that goes to the district and goes to SBC and ask them to just bring us a range of things just to figure this out and not necessarily put it in the budget.
I'm fine with that too.
I think that's probably a more appropriate way to handle it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do a letter.
Because we know how the governor likes to be told what to do in the budget.
Mr. Chairman, I can continue.
Please.
Right. Before we leave that, just one piece of information, the state does not pay major maintenance on the square footage that we lease. So there's no doubling there. If that
Yeah. So,
minor point.
so for right now, it's going to stay with the school, and we're still going to pay for it. And so, you know, we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, moving to agency 45, as I mentioned earlier this morning, if the JAC wanted to provide any authority for the Department of Transportation to proceed with the RIS system with their own money or not.
We'll cover that in ARPA.
Mr. Chairman, in agency 48, you made two additions. I think this was the Representative Larson amendment for mental health. At the time, you used ARP funds for revenue replacement in the amount of 7.2 million in the outpatient and 2.7 million for the residential treatment. The Department of Health has opined last evening that causes a conflict with some of their matching funds. They would prefer that out of general funds, not ARP conserved.
Motion to open.
Motion to open 048.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Kevin, you had a comment before we go?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Last evening, I requested Clifton Larson Allen to opine on this. And we can use revenue assistance, similar to the corrections in WIDOT. It's the middle ground between ARPA direct and then the conserved cash as matching to federal grants, as long as there's not been a waiver requested. And I'm in conversation right now with Stephen Johansson to see if that has happened. And he's going to work with Health and Human Services to see what the lay of the land looks like on that particular issue. So including the MOE aspect of this. So not only just for this portion of this, we're hopeful that we'll be able to look more deeply to using revenue assistance. That's the conversion of direct ARPA to general fund conservation to areas where there's federal matching. And that is we'll work through that process as a checking on to see if there's any waivers that have been submitted. And I'm not just thinking about crossing over in K-12 or higher education, just keep that on our side of the fence so that we can get to that $102 million that remains outside on the portion that's not converted for revenue assistance. I think it's fine at this point in time to unwind that portion if you'd like to, but we want to keep these options open and hopefully we can get to this before your final round robin to where we can give you solid guidance on how we're going to manage that 102 and maybe we can avoid or just get the problem solved.
So on some of these motions, we said use ARPA direct, and if that's not available, use ARPA reserve account. So,
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. And in conversations with Director Johansson, that would be in letter number 17. So you could keep this the way that it is with the expectation of we were successful in accomplishing, then we can proceed. And that would be the modification in Governor's Letter number 17 for the fallback position to say, come back. Now, the question would be, do you want to use general funds or do you want to use conserved revenue at this point in time so that we can keep that in play in the same realm of ARPA?
Well, these were one-time funds because of the nature of the motion that they're replaced with general funds anyway. So, Don, I think what we really need to do is say if it's ARPA direct, then that applies. And if it's not, then it would be conserved funds until for the one-time funding.
Mr. Chairman, it would be ARPA revenue assistance,
I'm sorry, yeah.
the calculated amount.
Right.
And if we can accomplish that, then fair game. If not, then make it conserved, because then we keep it into that Governor's Letter 17.
So I think we all understand that. So, and that's not what we did with these particular prop.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So the motion is to amend consistent with what Kevin just said. So we'll go down that road. Okay, everyone understand the motion? Don?
Just one comment there. Similar to some of your motions yesterday, all of these are now going to be double counted. So that
Because of the way we're doing it.
exactly. So you're going to be spending rather than, what is it? Rather than $9 million, you're going to be spending $18 million for this. Or at least that's the way it will show, because we have to obligate the general funds in case the ARPA funds are not available.
Mr. Chairman, I just think take it out of the conserved. Don't you?
For now, probably.
Because I think that as we get into our ARPA discussions and what monies are available to do what with, this is now off the table, then that may not be correct. So
if I can just repeat, I think we can solve this problem by, if we leave the or language in there, it gets double counted as far as availability of either general fund or conserved ARPA. And so ultimately need to designate either one or the other.
that's what I'm saying. So my motion to
So
you.
wait, before you do that,
Mr. Chairman, if you made this ARPA general fund conserved now, and then in the Governor's Letter number 17, provided the flexibility to move towards ARPA revenue assistance, then we could accomplish this if we can, and only single count.
Mr. Chairman, my motion would be to move that from direct ARPA to ARPA conserved funds.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Anything else?
And I just want to make sure for really Kevin that we're moving around with our nomenclature again. Are we where you thought we should end up?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it gives us the flexibility to put this into ARPA revenue assistance, and the math doesn't change in the tail end of how it's available to the state of Wyoming. It just helps us convert the ARPA dollar.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, just Don, do you concur?
Mr. Chairman, I'm understanding this to be revenue replacement ARPA funds.
Correct.
If those are not available, then the Department of Health will not be able to proceed with this. There is no general fund backup.
We discussed having this come out of general fund conservation, make the appropriation from general fund conservation, and then the flexibility in the Governor's Letter.
I think that's correct. We know the response.
So Don, but for me, please, when I say conserved, these are general fund dollars that by virtue of the trend, but you're saying, but we don't know how much of that has been appropriated. But if we commit to that, now, does that not show up when we start doing our ARPA stuff that we've committed this amount to be used out of that conserved amount?
Mr. Chairman, I sincerely apologize for the nomenclature. When I say I believe the motion said conserved ARPA. And when I read that, I read that as ARPA revenue replacement, meaning federal funds pay for this. I think the appropriate motion is conserved general funds.
And I thought that's what I was saying, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that's what we thought too. Okay. Next one, or do you want to break the lunch? How many more you got?
Did we close that? Meeting?
Motion to close. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
My apologies, Don.
We're done with 46,
48.
48, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, we have a couple easy ones, easier ones, or you can break.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on Agency 51, Representative Walter's amendment, a very minor issue, he added $60,000 general funds for brucellosis testing. That money was placed in Unit 303. It needs to be moved to Unit 301.
Move to open.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
Move to make the change, Mr. Chairman, from in Agency 051 from Unit 301 or 303 to Unit 301, I believe it is.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Those to close, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion
Mr. Chairman, in Agency 101, you adopted legislation for the Chancery Court to delay the effective date. You did not modify the money for the salary for that position. If you completely eliminated the salary to align with the new effective date, there would be a savings of $294,905. However, the agency has some concerns about the potential need for hiring someone before that, and they would recommend leaving or reducing it only by $73,705, providing them the flexibility they need if they were to hire that position at an earlier date.
So, Mr. Chairman, so just Dawn, I think that there's a bill that controls this. I mean, if the effective dates roll back, then wouldn't you, if the figures roll back, isn't that the bill where you would deal with this, with the reduction in compensation? Isn't, because otherwise, I mean, that's why it fixes it. If that bill doesn't pass, then this is the number that needs to be in there if the legislature fails to act.
Mr. Chairman, you can absolutely handle it in that bill.
And so I don't, it seems to me that we'd handle that with that bill. And if it doesn't pass, then the legislature said that they got to have the judge, and the judge has got to be there. That's what the legislature said before. So I would recommend we just handle it with the bill.
I think that makes sense. Those, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries.
One more point, I think. I believe this is the last technical one, the rest are policy. On Agency 160, this is county and prosecuting attorneys. You made $499,250 effective immediate. The governor had denied the underlying request. So we wanted to make sure you intended, so this is for county and prosecuting attorneys, they asked for money. We mentioned that the agency came forward and said, if you approve this, we would like it to be effective immediate. We just wanted to make sure you were aware the governor had denied that.
What was the money for?
This is for payments to county prosecutors under the formula. So they are running ahead of the available budget in the current biennium. I believe it's something like $35,000 per assistant prosecuting attorney per county.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that raises an interesting question
How did they
overall.
get- Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, the interesting question is they're not in any of the the compensation formula that we just put on a governor's letter doesn't affect county attorneys. And
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. It does not, that would require legislation to change because it is a formula based, not.
So how does it happen that they're paying themselves ahead of the statutory provision?
Mr. Chairman, the reductions last year to their budget were deeper than the formula provides. So they will be getting, and I don't know the percentage, but like 92 cents on the dollar under the current appropriation. And I don't know that it's 92 cents.
Yeah, whatever. And so what their request is to bring them back up to what?
to the statutory formula.
Right. And we just wanted to make sure you were aware. You made it effective immediate, but the governor had denied the entire
Kevin,
request.
do you know what the governor's thinking was?
Mr. Chairman, our position was predicated on the historical amount of reversions that they have. Naturally, they have vacancies and they haven't historically used all the funding,
But the vacancies occur in different locations, in different places.
but
just
it's all in the same budget.
So if we pay it now and they catch up, and if there are reversions, we'll get the reversions. Right?
Mr. Chairman, that's true.
So I don't see any to take any immediate action.
Mr. Chairman, I think that addressed all of our technical questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
So Don and maybe Kevin, maybe this isn't the right time, but I'll ask it anyway. It stuck in my mind that when we had the Department of Corrections discussion, when we was in that unit 6011 on the pay increases specifically for the penitentiary, and we talked about, do we just adopt the governor's pay increases? And if we done, then we proportionally brought them right back to where they were. And they were considering having an additional appropriation for the penitentiary staff. Did we resolve that? It sticks in my mind that was yet outstanding. I just remember the conversation that the chairman was having that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that you accepted the governor's recommendation on the post-salary adjustment of the $1.5 million as a denial.
Yeah, that exception request of 1.5 we adopted. Okay.
Right. And, Mr. Chairman, my recollection was that I think Director Bach said that they had worked that out and that it was worked out. They were provided for the differential in between WSP and the other locations. Maybe I remember wrong, but that's my recollection. Director Bach said that they had worked that out and that there was that differential did exist and would continue to exist.
Mr. Chairman, the question was answered that they can have a differential in pay predicated on the facility that they have. And there's a little bit of confusion on the front end side because there's the minimum that kept them at $17. And then if you use the $3 million that they provided, then that would get them up to $22. And then the director said that the $22 isn't necessarily going to resolve his situation at the penitentiary.
Okay.
So
it may be a problem. We may be looking at this again in a year just to see what happens over there.
Well, it may be that they could pay him $50 on it.
Yeah, that's true too.
Mr. Chairman, yes, and then that puts us in the same vein that we have been is overtime.
thank you.
Don? Anything else? Okay, we'll stand in recess. So next, we'll do the two bills this afternoon. The question is, what time do we come back? Do we want to meet informally to work our individual bodies on draft ARPA outlines? We want to do the two bills first and then do that?
I think we would, Mr. Chairman, I would think we would do the two bills and do that and then. Initial discussion, see if we can start to figure out where we're all going to be on ARPA.
Okay, it's 12:30. Let's come back at 1:15.